Most people are inclined to think that the United Kingdom is the country that has influenced the United States the most throughout its history. However, it's important to consider that this influence was only truly decisive when the US consisted of the original 13 colonies, a time when the country occupied barely 9% of its current territory. Even so, British influence shouldn't be underestimated. They ruled the East Coast for over 150 years, established English as the dominant language, and bequeathed a legal system based on judicial precedents, among many other fundamental contributions. Other countries also hold great influence over the US, such as Mexico, due to the territory it ceded and the massive migration that continues today, and France, which financed American independence with a fortune and sold the Louisiana Territory, an area that now spans nearly 15 states, purchased for just 7 cents per hectare. However, in this video, I will attempt to demonstrate that the country that best explains what the US is today is actually another. It is widely known that the United States has a massive German influence, the result of great waves of migration. In fact, it's very likely that many of you watching this video have at least one ancestor from Germany. Yet, we rarely emphasize just how deep the German footprint in America truly goes. The first sign of this connection lies in the last names of many prominent Americans in politics, business, cinema, and music. These names are often German or English variations of originally German surnames. This is no coincidence. Today, it's estimated that between 40 and 45 million people in the US are of German descent. This constitutes the largest ethnic contribution in the entire country, surpassing both England and Mexico. To put that into perspective, the German descendant population in the US is roughly equal to the entire population of countries like Canada or Poland, or the combined populations of New York and Florida. But how did the United States become a country with a German descendant majority? To understand this, we must go back to the 17th century, even before the United States existed as a nation. From 1683 to 1775, the first wave of migration took place, coming mostly from the Palatinate region, as well as Baden-Württemberg, Alsace, and Switzerland. These migrants were generally escaping religious persecution and the devastation of the 30 Years' War. They settled in Pennsylvania and founded Germantown. During this era, the proportion of people from the Palatinate was so high that all German Americans were simply referred to as Palatines. Later, between 1840 and 1860, following the failed 1848 revolutions in Europe, a second wave of nearly 1.5 million people arrived. This time, they came primarily from Prussia, Hanover, Saxony, and Hesse. Unlike the Irish, who often arrived in absolute poverty, this German wave generally consisted of well-educated individuals with higher purchasing power, allowing them to buy land further inland from the East Coast. Then, between 1870 and 1890, the largest migration wave erupted, with around 2.8 million people arriving from Saxony, East Prussia, and Bavaria. They were driven by land shortages and the Industrial Revolution, which had left thousands of artisans unemployed. This wave was further boosted by Abraham Lincoln's Homestead Act of 1862, which aimed to spur the agricultural economy by selling underutilized land at very low prices. Finally, between the 1930s and 1960s, another 1.4 million people arrived, mostly war refugees, scientists, and war brides, German women who married American soldiers. These massive population shifts significantly altered U.S. demographics, creating what is known today as the German Belt in the Midwest and Northeast, specifically in states like Pennsylvania, Ohio, Illinois, Missouri, Wisconsin, and the Dakotas. However, the impact wasn't just demographic. German immigrants introduced vital cultural changes, such as early childhood education, the kindergarten, and the nation's beer culture, among many others. They also played a key role during the American Civil War, fighting for the Union. It is said that German participation in the northern ranks was so massive that German was spoken as frequently as English on the front lines. This event facilitated the integration of Germans into the American nation. By fighting and dying alongside their neighbors, they earned the country's respect. But this commitment to national unity and the abolition of slavery had a dark side. In Texas, a group of German residents refused to fight for the Confederacy or swear an oath to its cause. While attempting to flee to Mexico, about 25 of them were hunted down and killed in what became known as the Nueces Massacre. Another decisive influence is the American university model. Higher education institutions in America originally followed the example of Oxford and Cambridge, boarding schools for the elite focused on religion, Latin, Greek, and, gentlemanly, manners. By the late 19th century, however, the US began to imitate the German model pioneered by Wilhelm von Humboldt. In this system, the professor wasn't just a teacher, but a professional researcher who produced new knowledge. This model allowed students to focus their studies on specific technical fields. This approach made German education so advanced that, for a time, it was believed a scientist who didn't speak German couldn't stay up to date in their field. The first replica of this German model was Johns Hopkins University, founded in 1876. This model was later adopted by Harvard, Yale, and Columbia, producing the technically skilled professionals that the industries of the era desperately needed. A final notable influence lies in the fabric of American business. The German cultural focus on applied knowledge shaped U.S. industry through conglomerates like Pfizer, Hellmann's, Levi Strauss, Steinway & Sons, and Bausch & Lomb, all founded by German immigrants. Others, like Boeing, Chrysler, Heinz, Caterpillar, John Deere, and Rockefeller's Standard Oil, were founded by the children of German immigrants born in the U.S. Other corporate giants with German roots include investment banks like Goldman Sachs and Lehman Brothers. Furthermore, German migration has deeply impacted American scientific output. Think of physicist Albert Einstein, aerospace engineer Wernher von Braun, mathematician John von Neumann, physicist Maria Goeppert-Mayer, philosopher Hannah Arendt, biologist Max Delbruck, and psychologist Kurt Lewin. Although the German language was banned in 26 states during World War I, it remains the third most taught language in U.S. high schools today, behind only Spanish and French. German-speaking pockets still exist in states like Texas, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Indiana, and the Dakotas. In fact, the latest census shows that about 1 million people still speak German at home. On average, Americans of German descent are better educated and earn between 10% and 15% more than the national average, according to official data. Nevertheless, the migratory flow has stagnated. Today, only about 100,000 Germans live in the U.S. as permanent residents, mostly in academic or professional roles in Silicon Valley and the automotive industry. In contrast, 120,000 Americans have moved to Germany, motivated by the lower cost of education and the healthcare system. Finally, consider some of the most prominent figures in modern America with direct German ancestry. Donald Trump, whose paternal grandfather Friedrich Trump emigrated from Karlstadt. Leonardo DiCaprio, through his mother Ermeline Indenbirken. Bruce Willis, who was born in Germany to a German mother. Peter Thiel, born in Frankfurt. Mark Zuckerberg, who has German Jewish roots. Warren Buffett, whose paternal ancestors came from Eisleben. And the Pritzker family, owners of the Hyatt chain and one of America's wealthiest families. In summary, Germany's influence on the U.S. is profound. It remains the largest ethnic group in the country. It inspired the modern higher education system. It is responsible for many of the nation's most important companies, and it has been a decisive force in politics and the film industry. For these reasons, Germany may well be the most influential country in American history. What about you? Did you know the German influence in the US was this strong? Do you find it strange that there are now more Americans in Germany than Germans in the US? Subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. Best regards, and I'll see you in the next one.